All right, we are live on Facebook and we are recording. I'm John Mercer, president of Las Vegas Triathlon Club. Got Ted Girouard here, ambassador for the club, and really the motivation for doing these video talks. So we affectionately call them, or daringly call them, Ted Tri Talks. But tonight we're going to talk about swimming.
Yes.
How's it going, Ted?
Good. How are you going?
Oh, doing good. Yeah.
All right.
Nice to be able to be swimming again.
Yeah, it's that is a real treat, isn't it, to actually get out and get some swimming in. I've been trying to get in a couple times a week. It's been interesting. I didn't lose as much as I thought I was gonna, and I think that's a good thing for other people to realize. Is like, you know what, you've probably lost a little bit of strength. But the technique really is still, it's not great, but it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. How about you?
No, that's good. I actually did quite a bit of dry land work during the non-pool open period, and I felt I maintained pretty good. I am a little slower, but it just takes time, and it just takes feel. And I love swimming. I'll try to swim 6 days a week usually. Nothing long. I do a lot of, my base swim is 1,500 meters, and I'll do that usually 5 times a week, and then I'll do one long swim, depending on time of year and what race I'm targeting, anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000.
Yeah. I also think that people need to realize, and I think you've realized this as well, is that you're getting fitness from other places, right? You've been riding consistently, and I've been riding consistently and running. And so it's not like you don't have any fitness. It's, you still are relatively fit. It's just more of a muscle issue.
No, very much so. And I'll take it one step further in that, if you want to do an hour swim in an Ironman, just line up next to me. I'm almost always an hour. Sometimes a little faster, sometimes a little slower. But for me to really put a dent in my swim time, I probably would need to swim 2 or 3 times longer, which is a lot of time. And I can actually put that time into biking or running and actually have a bigger payoff. So I'm really happy with my swim being right around an hour. And so what I'm really training for often is not necessarily to get better at swimming, but to get better on the bike or better on the run. And so trying to have that swim fitness so I can get out of the swim and get on the bike and get going.
So John, let me ask you this, and this is a question I think a lot of triathletes have. What percentage of time in a week, if you had an optimal week, would you say you swim? As far as training, let's say you train 15 to 20 hours a week. Yep. How many hours would be swimming?
Well, I should have that on Strava. I could probably pull that up, but it's probably right around 20% of the time. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because when we race in an Ironman, for you, it's less than 10% of the total time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think people often stress about swimming. I know I do.
Yep.
But when you look at the grand scheme of things, especially in the longer course, half Ironman and Ironman, the percentage of swim time to the rest is about 10%.
Yeah.
And, I know that for me, like, especially when I was racing more Olympic distance, I felt it more because I put more hours in because the percentage was greater.
Yeah.
Right. And it's actually, that was the impetus for me to do my first half Ironman. Somebody told me, like, if you go to a half Ironman and you quit messing around with these Olympic distances, the percentage of swimming goes down.
Oh, there you go.
And I was like, oh, that was a little light bulb attached, came up, and it was 400 meters further.
Yeah.
That was it. That's not much.
Mm-hmm.
But the bike was significantly longer, and the run is significantly longer. And so I was like, yeah, this is a good idea for a relatively poor swimmer.
And you've got a great bike run combo. That's a great weapon for you. And I tend to be more of a swim bike combo, and then try to do what I can on the run still. So
then the question would be, if somebody was in your situation or my situation, like how to attack it, right? So the thing that for me, like, I do feel like I should swim more because it is my weakness, right?
Oh.
And I don't enjoy it as much as going for a really enjoyable bike ride or really enjoyable run.
Yeah.
But I know that that's my weakness, and I should attack it. Do you think of the same things for you when you're for running?
Uh, a little bit. My run suffers for a number of other reasons that maybe uh, aren't necessarily related to getting faster in the swim. In fact, I jotted down a number of things that I think we can go through that will help anyone swim. And sometimes you can improve your swim time with just doing some little things.
Yeah.
And I want to go through some of that. But one of my tricks to swimming, biking, or running is I try to always convince myself I love doing it. And I know a lot of people dread the swim. They may not have started swimming until later in their adult years, and it's a little harder. I was fortunate enough to start swimming early. Swam in high school, swam in college, Division III, and so I've been swimming for a long time. But I still, uh, before I jump in and start my swim, I walk up to the edge and I say I love swimming, and jump in and go. Even if I'm having a bad day or a rough day, I still say it, and that mindset just sort of, for me, actually carries over and helps me enjoy the workout, because that's what we're doing it, because it's supposed to be fun. So
Yeah. Yeah. If not, we should just do duathlons.
that's right. That's right. All right. So maybe what I'll do, I wanted to start with a little bit of the physics of swimming,
Yes.
and then maybe get into some tips. I took some video this past week, and I'll show some points there too. I'll talk a little bit about technique, but then I really want to talk about some of the little things. I know you do these too.
Well,
So
can we, and John, I don't know if you're going to do it, but in your lingo or in your thing, can you talk a little bit about the lingo? Because I know that
yeah,
was confusing for me too. Are you going to talk about the catch and the pull? And because that, when people talk about those things, like I listen to podcasts, and it took me a long time to figure out exactly what those things were.
okay, yeah, no, that's great. So let me do this. I'm actually going to switch over to my document camera.
Yes.
Hopefully, if this works. Is my doc camera up?
Yep.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, yeah, but I don't know. I'm going to do it as gallery view, because I don't know if it pops up as the full window. So let me see what's showing up on Facebook. All right. So here's my swimmer. I'm not a great artist, but that's my swimmer. So here's the water. And what's important when in the work that I do with biomechanics, we identify forces acting on an object. In this case, the object is a person. So the forces acting on the swimmer, gravity pulling down on the person, buoyancy pushing up on the person. So I'll do F sub B, and that's vertical stuff. Now I'm going to talk about buoyancy because we're going to be wearing a wetsuit, and that's important. But the two real important forces I want to talk about is the drag force, drag resistance, and then this force right here, which I call drag propulsion. And this is the force that's going to make us go forward. But notice I called both of these drag forces. Now, there is propulsion from the legs, but I'm going to be super lazy and not include that right now.
Yep.
It does contribute to maybe 10%, but when you put a wetsuit on, that percentage actually goes down a bit. So here's the neat thing in looking at drag resistance and drag propulsion, is that they're both drag forces, and we use the equation, and you recognize this equation, 1/2 CDA, I forgot, rho V squared.
Yep.
That's the same force equation that we use when we talk about drag force in cycling. Same exact equation. So
Yep.
CD is how well the fluid moves over the object. A is the frontal area. So if we actually put a camera at the front part of the swimmer looking towards the swimmer, we would just look at the area that's moving through the water, or moving through the fluid here. Now, we usually collectively call those CDA because they're sometimes hard to separate from each other. This was supposed to be a rho, and that's just the density of the fluid. In this case, it's water. and water is about 800 times more dense than air. And that's why drag force is a bigger issue in swimming versus cycling. And then V is the fluid, how fast the fluid is moving over the object. So we usually say that's swim speed, but if you're swimming up current or down current, that V will be different. That's actually how fast the fluid's moving over the person. So the trick with swimming faster is to have a good drag propulsion force and very little drag resistance force. The drag propulsion force, you're trying to increase this equation. So whatever you're doing with your hand or with your arm, you're trying to increase the parameters on this side so that you actually are able to create more force to move yourself forward. Likewise, you're trying to decrease all these elements in this equation to reduce the resistance force. All right, because what we do is we add up these two forces and we understand how fast someone's swimming.
So if those two numbers were equal, you'd just sit there and not go anywhere, right?
Actually, if they're equal, you would move at a constant velocity.
Oh, okay, right.
And which is, the one way to think that's what we're trying to do. But in reality, as you're swimming, you're always speeding up, you're always slowing down. You're always speeding up, always slowing down. So these two forces are interplaying with each other, but the concept is to try to go the same velocity. And so eventually they would be equal. So if you can reduce this resistance force, all this propulsion force is going to end up making you go faster.
Right.
All right. So that's the physics behind swimming. Now, these are buoyancy and drag and gravity forces. This is vertical stuff, which is good to talk about because we don't want to sink. But I'm going to skip over those right now. We'll talk about a little bit with the wetsuit part. All right, so now and you're familiar with the CDA from all the cycling.
Right. It's exactly the same.
Yep. So
it's just the row is so drastically different.
That's right. And it's
but
different.
Velocity is also drastically different.
That's right. And row is going to be different if we're in freshwater or if we're in salt water.
Yep.
Salt water is going to be more dense. That's why you're more buoyant in salt water versus freshwater. So things do change when you're swimming in the ocean versus in fresh water. But that's the equation. Now what I want to do is show some of the video I put together. All right, is my video coming up?
Yes.
Okay, so I just took some video with my GoPro. In this case, I put the GoPro underwater and I swam over the GoPro. And I wanted to illustrate early vertical forearm. That's the big catchphrase with swimming propulsion right now, is to try to get this forearm vertical early in this part of the stroke. Now, this part of the stroke, when the hand's up in this region, is the catch phase. And then you have some propulsion phase down here. So early vertical forearm, you are trying, and people will say high elbow. I've never liked that because actually the history is the high elbow was more about the recovery of the arm back to the next catch phase. And you always, the instructions were, the technique was always keep your elbow high during the recovery phase. That somehow transitioned into having a high elbow in swimming, but a better way to think about it is early vertical forearm. Why early vertical forearm? Because you're trying to increase the A part of that drag force equation. You're trying to create as much area being pushed against the water, and that's going to increase the drag force that you're pushing on the water, which will increase your propulsion force. Same thing with the hand here. You're trying to manage a good platform for the hand, and you're trying to increase the A part of that 1/2 rho CDA V squared equation. If you wear hand paddles, you know that that increases the area, or if you swim with fists, then it decreases the area, decreases the propulsion force, and you don't swim as fast when you swim with fists, which is a really good drill to actually do because you learn how to use your forearm to help create some of that drag propulsion. All right, so I don't have a great vertical forearm, or this isn't super good, but I'll tell you that to get this technique, what I tell people and what I do myself is I will stand in front of a mirror on land and practice it, because you really have to get a sense for what you need to do at the shoulder in order to get that forearm vertical. And it's almost a little bit of contortionism to get that early vertical forearm. And I always say, if you can't do it on dry land, you're not going to be able to do it in the water. So practicing in front of a mirror on dry land is actually a really good way to try to get that stroke technique. And what I've tried to do is actually put my hand in the water a little wider, and that tends to help me get into that early vertical forearm a bit better. All right, so now,
so John, do you know what some of the limiters are as far as like the physical limitations to getting an early vertical forearm, as far as like what area of the shoulder might be tight or maybe need to be stretched? Or
yeah, that's one of the keys with getting that vertical forearm is getting, I don't, maybe you can see me in the profile there, but you've got to figure out how to get this arm vertical, this part of the arm vertical. And in order to do that, your shoulder has to move a particular way, and you can't keep the arm all the way out here, because if you go early, you can't. So you've got to get that elbow outside. And so that's why it's a little easier to catch wider and then think getting that arm down into obviously this is the wrong profile I'm looking at, but getting that arm vertical with the bottom of the pool where my fingers are pointing right down the bottom. So it is about shoulder mobility. And this is where you do need to be careful, because when you do start doing the early vertical forearm, you're increasing the area, which means you're increasing the drag force that's applied to the hand, which means you're putting more stress on the shoulder.
Yeah, you put more torque in the shoulder.
Exactly, but this is what you're trying to do. And so you do need to introduce this carefully. But the idea is of early vertical forearm, you engage your lats, your big muscles even more, and be able to use the muscles that really can help propel you forward.
Okay.
All right, so let's look at it. I think my next slide or next series is from the side. The other thing I talk with people about with swimming is when you put your hand in the water, what you're really trying to do is swim past your hand. Just like when you're rowing a boat. So if you row a boat, you put your paddle in the water and your paddle stays in one place and your boat moves past the paddle. If the paddle moves through the water, you're not going to be moving your boat forward. That's the same thing with swimming. We're trying to put our hand here in the water. We're trying to anchor it with that drag propulsion force. And that drag force prevents the hand from moving backwards in the water. You're not actually pulling through the water. You're actually just trying to leave your hand in the water and pull your body over your hand. So a good stroke, if you watch good swimmers, and you'll see my hand slips through the water a little bit, you're into the water at one place, and then the hand will exit the water at about the same place. And actually good swimmers, the hand will exit further along because you are getting some propulsion from the kick as well. All right, so I'm going to come back the other way. So here the hand is entering the water right about this line right here. And I'll just move the cursor along here. And the idea is, from swimming, is trying to keep that hand there. And now I'm exiting the water. So you can see it slipped a little bit. I'm losing efficiency there. I'm losing propulsion. So I've got to work on my technique a little bit to try to keep that hand anchored. So that's something, it's just a different way of thinking about swimming, is you're trying to move the hand or move the body past the hand.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. That's really good advice.
And just like a rowboat. And then, I wanted to say something about the kick. I get a lot of questions about the kick. And being in triathlon, we don't need to kick a lot. And now some people naturally kick a lot, and that's fine. But once you put the wetsuit on, that sort of takes the legs and puts them higher in the water. And so you don't need to do as much with the legs. So really what the trick with the legs is, it's not so much working on propulsion, but it's a timing between the kick and the arms. And there's a rhythm between what's going on at the lower body and what's going on in the upper body. Now, when you put fins on, what you really should be focused on is understanding that timing between the kick and the arms. And if you can get that timing down, it's just like dancing at that point. It's a very rhythmic stroke, and it takes a lot less effort if you've got good coordination between lower extremity and upper extremity.
You know, John, speaking of the kick, and I know we don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think that, you know, I heard this from a video or learned it somewhere along the way, was in triathlon. One of the things that, especially people that come from a running background, tend to have a really running-ish kick, and it's creating a lot of drag, a lot of area.
Yep.
And you'd be better off to not kick at all and keep your legs basically streamlined, so you're not creating
Yep.
You know, you're not adding area, because you're not gaining as much force as you are losing in basically in drag against you.
That's right.
You heard that?
Oh, totally. That's great. And a lot of times, a lot of people will not have that flexibility in the ankle, and the ankle will actually put the foot in a position that actually slows you down.
Yeah.
And so I actually had a good elite triathlete friend back in the 80s. He could not kick. And in fact, when he did kicking drills, he would go backwards because his ankle had so little flexibility that he was actually creating propulsion force in the wrong direction. And so, you know, yes, you need to try to get the feet and the lower extremity out of the way. Now, if you swim faster with a pull buoy, that's usually a sign that that your legs are sinking when you're not using the pull buoy, and that's increasing the part of that drag force equation, and that's going to increase the resistance force.
Or I think, you know, for me at least, when I did some video, I was creating a big scissor.
Yep.
And so when I hit as a pull buoy, I didn't do that.
Yep.
So even though I had good ankle flexibility,
yep,
when I was kicking, I was basically creating just drag just because of how big the kick was.
That's exactly right. You don't need a big kick. You just need to time it correctly with the hands.
Yeah. And I think runners and cyclists especially have a problem with that because they're used to that range of motion.
Yep. No, that's right. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of discussion in terms of what the timing should be for your kick and your hand. I like to think in my mind, I'm finishing my stroke and kicking on the same side, and that's going to rotate me over for the catch on the next arm. And so I'm always trying to finish my stroke and kick with the same side to rotate over.
So that's the timing for you,
for a 2-beat kick. Yep.
Would you say that we're talking about is the kick that is an anterior or a forward type kick?
So the kick, I don't know if you do bend your knee.
Right.
So, but you see, there's not a lot of movement of the lower extremity. You know, the kick is just going deep enough to give a little bit of propulsion, but you do have to practice actually bending your knee and then extending your knee. And it's a weird coordination, but that doing some kick drills helps. I actually don't like using a kickboard as much, but I'll do like a catch-up drill if I'm going to do a drill to work on the kick.
Okay, perfect.
Once you put the wetsuit on, that sort of takes out the need to kick. And now you've just got to have good timing between the lower extremity and the upper extremity. And I'm not trying to say my stroke's great.
No,
it's good enough to put me in a good position so I can be competitive on the bike and run. All right, so that's probably as deep I want to go for stroke. And really, you need someone to see your stroke. I think it's more powerful to get video and to look at yourself and then get feedback as well. as I said, I advocate practicing your stroke in front of a mirror, because if you can't do it on dry land, you will not be able to do it in the water. And once you're in the water, you've got all this other tactile stimulation going on that you can't always figure out where your hands are or where your legs are.
Yeah.
All right, but now I want to switch gears to some practical points that might help swimming, especially for open water. Sighting. Sighting is so important for the events that we do. And I encourage people to practice this in the pool, because you know you're going to be going straight because you've got the black line to follow. And if you sight, you can sight something really easy as the starting blocks or at the end of the pool. And so your sighting should be very little disruption to your stroke, very little disruption. And so here I am, I'm going to sight every stroke here. Let me do that again. I'm sighting every stroke, and it really is just sorry. It is really just enough lift of the head to get a snapshot. Your head does not need to come out of the water a lot. Now, I do prefer to sight off my right arm, but I do practice sighting off my right arm as well as my left arm, but I'm better at it on my right side. It's just the way my stroke is and the way my breathing is that I'm able to sight and better off the right stroke. But those are things you got to practice, and practice it during your regular swim in the swim pool, because it's a good way to try to get efficient with just lifting your head just enough to see where you're going. The other thing I think is really important to practice is clearing your goggles mid-swim. You know, we all get foggy goggles, we all get little leaky goggles, and sometimes we get in the habit of stopping at the end of the pool in between sets and then clearing them or cleaning them. Nope, don't do that. Do it while you're swimming, because during your half Ironman, your Ironman, or even your sprint distance, your goggles may get fogged up, they may get loose, they may get kicked, and you've got to adjust them, and you got to practice being able to do that in stroke. And so I do this all the time. I'll just swim and I do a quick little clear. I'm not touching the bottom of the pool, and then I get going. I can lose very little time doing that. So practice clearing, and I also practice during the long swims and Ironman. My cap will get loose every now and then, and you just got to get comfortable with being able to adjust your cap during an Ironman swim as well.
You know, John, it's interesting because like I've tried those things, and honestly, I'm so horrible at it. Like to clear my goggles, I have got to flip on my back, and that's what I do. I flip on my back and I kick, and it's not very efficient. Yeah. But you know, you get into a situation where you can't see, it's into the sun or something like that, and I have no other option.
Yep.
And it's because I didn't even think honestly about practicing that in the pool. So that's a very good tip. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so here I am. I went down Lake Mead and I took a little video, because sighting in open water is going to be a little bit different, because now you're going to have more waves and a bigger body of water. I don't have any other reference frames around me. I don't have the lane lines. I don't have the line at the bottom of the pool. And so now I've got to quickly figure out which way I'm going. But you'll see my sighting technique is going to be the same. I really am not lifting my head up much at all. I'm just getting enough of my eyes out of the water so I can get a snapshot of where I'm headed. So I just mounted the camera. I'm sighting every stroke. That's my lazy stroke. So just enough. And how often should you sight? I'll sight every stroke until I feel like I've got a good bead on where I'm going. And then maybe I'll go every 3 strokes. And a stroke is every time your hand hits the water. So, but I will sight on every right arm stroke for some distance, just to make sure that I'm on the right track, because there's nothing worse than swimming longer than you need to.
Yep.
You know, if we're doing a bike race, we're not making extra turns. We're not adding distance to our bike ride or a run. Same thing with swimming. You can get faster simply by swimming straighter. and picking a good line. So sighting, having a good technique to sight. Now, if I am in a race and I've lost a good marker to sight on, I do stop, do some breaststroke, get my head up high out of the water, and I'll try to figure out where I'm going, get a better bead, and then start off again. So it does actually save you time if you stop and make sure that you're on the right track, rather than going off track, trying to be even efficient with just lifting your head a little bit. So I've got some more video here on some sighting out in the water, but that brings me up to course recon. All right, if you go and do course recon, this is really important. You're always going to be higher when you're looking at the swim course when you're on shore, because the water level is always going to be lower. Right? So sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, I'll walk up, and this is our swim start down here, or a swim for our triathlon. You look at the swim course from a bridge, or standing up on the shore somewhere, and you say, oh yeah, that doesn't look that bad. Looks pretty short. But then you get down closer to the water and it seems so much further, or you're swimming and it's like, oh my gosh, that buoy's all the way out there. I've got to go there. So the line of sight can be really deceiving when you're doing course recon from the surface. So here's our buoys here that we use for a swim course, swimming out to this one, then that one, and this one. They don't look that bad from this perspective. But if we head down to the shore, and this is what I do, and I encourage others to do it, go down water level. And now you're going to start being able to see landscape that you want to pick out to be able to sight. I don't sight the buoys. All right. When I'm getting ready to head off for the swim start, I'll figure out where the buoy is. This isn't a great video, but the buoy is right here. And now I'm not sighting that buoy anymore. I'm sighting this distinct landmark right here, this big butte right here with that edge right there. I'm going to line myself up so I'm looking at this. And so I'm no longer just sighting the buoy. Once you start having waves, and if the waves start getting big, now you're in troughs of waves, you're at the top of waves, it gets harder to find the buoy. So I don't use the buoy as my key sight, especially in our races, because we just use the small white buoys for our course. Other courses, BBSC, they have bigger buoys, where easier to see, but still on wavy days, it can still be hard to find the buoy. So you want to pick out the landmarks, but get down low to the water level. I'll do some course recon for courses where I do look up on top of the course, trying to find the shortest distance between buoys. All right, so now I'm out in the lake, and now you've got waves you got to deal with, and you've got to sight some landscape. And let me see if I can spot the buoy here. It's even hard. It's right here. So now I'm not going to be looking for the buoy anymore. I'm going to look for this dip in the horizon, or maybe this peak right here, and I'm going to swim towards that. And when I'm sighting, I'm actually sighting that landscape. So that's going to the south buoy. I just turned around here. And in Lake Mead, swimming to the north buoy is a little easier because we do have some good peaks out here. And the north buoy is out here, so I'm swimming to that peak. And that's all I'm doing, is I'm sighting landscape. If I'm out doing course recon at a swim event, I will try to, if there's a practice swim, get out to either the start or the finish, or both, and just try to figure out what landmarks I'm going to sight, so I know that ahead of time. Do you do that as well?
Well, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. It depends on the race too. Like some races have huge buoys, like 20 feet. And in that case, like, especially if you're on the course recon and you see there's 20-foot buoys, then I don't really worry too much about it. But if they're smaller buoys, absolutely.
Yep. All right, and that is my video there. Yeah, and practicing that sighting out in the lake is key to getting comfortable, Because again, once you're out there, it all of a sudden, everything seems a little bit further than when looking at the shore. But looking at the shore, we're higher, even when we're standing there. I always tell people, get low, get down at the water level to try to see where you're going to try to go.
The one piece of advice that I could give you here, or give people here, is to stay conscious in your swimming. I think a lot of times, I've been guilty of it in the past. In racing in particular, I'm thinking about the bike, I'm thinking about the run, I'm thinking about my nutrition, and I really need to think about the swim, right? Think about what I'm doing. And so one of the little techniques that I use is I count while I'm swimming. And so I count to 5 every, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and every 5, then I sight.
Mm-hmm.
It just keeps a rhythm for me. And I just keep that rhythm, keep that rhythm, keep that rhythm. And eventually it just becomes second nature. And I actually don't even have to count anymore. But then my mind will wander.
Yeah.
And if I go back to my counting, I think that for me personally, that helps keep me going. Because if I don't, my mind will wander and it'll be 20 strokes and I haven't sighted.
Yep. And then, and none of us swim straight.
No.
You've got to, one, I know I pull to my left. I know that, and I still do it. And so, sighting is really, is important. And I probably sight more frequently than you. Yeah. But I've gotten to a point where my sighting technique is pretty, efficient. I can put my hand in the water, I get my head up out, and I get right back into my stroke. And it's, you're trying to lose very little time or expend very little effort to do that sight. Yeah. So that's something to practice. That's good. All right, so let me go through some more. Let's hear. I got some more stuff here. Well, I guess we need to talk about the wetsuit.
Yeah, let's talk about the wetsuit.
The wetsuit does make you faster.
Yes, it does.
Makes us all faster for the most part. The really, really fast swimmers may only get a little bit of benefit, and the really, really, really slow swimmers may only get a little bit of benefit as well. But at the slow end, the nice thing is you get a little bit more thermal regulation, and a lot of our races are cooler water, so it's nice to have a little bit more warmth while you may be out there, for 2 hours or 2:15. That's a long time to be in the water, especially if the water's cooler temperature, even low 70s and high 60s. I definitely would want a wetsuit. Now, in terms of the equation, drag resistance, the wetsuit reduces the CDA. The CD, the wetsuit's smoother, so the water moves over it easierly. And the A part also gets reduced because the wetsuits lift your legs up. And most of us do swim at a little bit of an angle. And so by wearing a wetsuit, that brings that lower body up and that reduces that A. So the CDA is reduced, which reduces the drag resistance force. So the big question a lot of people have, the big question is how to choose the right wetsuit. You got to try them on. It's not easy to get fit in these, and I get a little sometimes I don't know, really critical of people when they say, well, the fit is important, but yet we don't have good objective criteria for what a good fit wetsuit is. And a good fit wetsuit on dry land is different than a good fit wetsuit in the water. They're different. They feel different. The wetsuit, when you put it on at first, it can be very restrictive. It can feel restrictive. But usually when you get swimming a little bit, you're horizontal. You actually have some compression from the water pushing on the body as well. And it will loosen up a bit. But there is, and we probably need to do a separate video for this, there are some tricks with getting the wetsuit on so that it, in a way that it doesn't feel as restrictive. And usually we do this in Paris. My wife and I will, get together, we'll put our wetsuits on, and we know how far to pull the wetsuit up. We know how to work the loose neoprene up into the shoulder region, both from the side and front and the back of the wetsuit, and also up the arms. And you try to get as much of the neoprene released up in the shoulder region and in the neck region to where you feel more mobile in the upper body and less restricted. You don't want the neck region to be loose because you don't want water to go down in here. So there needs to be a sense of tightness up here, but not too tight. We actually did some work years ago where we looked at what happens to your blood pressure when you wear too tight of a wetsuit. And too tight actually can increase your blood pressure. Now, when we were looking at it, we were dealing with normal tensive people. So maybe the blood pressure went from 120 to 128 millimeters mercury systolic, something like that. Nothing dangerous. But I do say, if you are hypertensive, you need to really pay attention to your wetsuit tightness. And you don't want a wetsuit that's overly tight. It needs to be snug, but not overly tight. We'll do a
Well,
wetsuit.
John, you have a blood pressure response while you're swimming too, right?
Yeah.
So with any activity, your blood pressure is going to increase. So if, let's say, you are 120 over 80 normally, when you're exercising, maybe you go to 150 over 80, and then you're also going to get distension of, especially the jugular and carotid arteries.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that is an important thing for people. You shouldn't feel like you're choking.
No,
right?
Not at all.
And I think that's a thing that once, and you mentioned it, you got to try these things on, and you got to practice with them. And oftentimes we get, I got a great deal on the internet, and and you don't practice it before the first race of the season. You get there and you're like, well, it's, let's say it's Rage, and the water is 58 degrees. You're wearing it no matter what, right?
Or the other way is you wore it the last season. It fit well at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But then you gain a little bit of weight going into the next season, and maybe it doesn't fit as well. So no, you're spot on. You need to practice in your wetsuit prior to your race.
John, have you ever heard of hydrating your wetsuit as well?
Yeah, you can soak it because it does. The flexibility will change over time,
especially in an off season, right?
What's that?
Especially over an off season. Like,
yeah.
Even in the garage or something like that over the off season.
My wetsuits are hanging up right. These are my race wetsuits. Now I've got my practice wetsuits down in the garage because I don't care about those. All right. And that's, I think, something that's important too, is I'll practice in a wetsuit because then I don't care if I rip it or, a lot of wear and tear on it. But come race week, I'll put my race suit on and I'll try it and make sure that everything's working and it's fit right and all that. But yeah, I do have a race suit. I have race suits and I'll choose the right one depending on what I'm doing or what the temperature is. But then practice ones as well. But like you said, if it's tight in the neck, what that usually means is the back is too tight and we don't have enough neoprene up front. So what we'll do, and we'll do a video on this, my wife will turn around and I'll grab the back of her wetsuit and I'll work it up and then release it up on the front part. So I'm trying to stretch it in a way that brings the neoprene back up to the front part and gives a little bit more mobility up front.
Yeah.
And but you're right, you don't want that cut off feeling, because that's just going to increase anxiety when you're out in the water. Mm-hmm. And that's not going to help at all. Full sleeve versus sleeveless, it's a temperature issue. I swam in a sleeveless for a long time. I actually resisted a full sleeve, but now the way that they design the wetsuits, a lot more mobility. We actually did some research on how, and we're doing it right now, how active the muscles are while swimming in a wetsuit. And if it's too restrictive, you can influence what's going on at the shoulder. So the higher end wetsuits will have more flexibility in the shoulder region than in the lower end wetsuits. That's usually the biggest difference in price point is what's going on in the shoulder region. So if someone enjoys a sleeveless, that's fine. You're faster, more likely in the sleeved wetsuit, and it'll be a bit warmer as well.
So John, we're talking about the fit of a wetsuit. Should there be water getting into your wetsuit?
So it is a wetsuit, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the way you stay warm is water gets in the wetsuit, your body heats up that water, and that insulating layer of water is what's going to keep you warm. So yes, there is a little bit of water. Now, that being said, the way the triathlon wetsuits are built is they are built to minimize how much water goes into the wetsuit. And in fact, if you go out and you swim and you open up your wetsuit and you let all the water go into it, it actually can decrease the performance of the wetsuit, because it's not, now you've got too much water in the wetsuit, and this can actually increase your CD or your A of that drag force resistance. And so you don't want to get a lot of water inside the wetsuit. And
So I always get a little bit, like in the small of my back. I can
Yep.
feel it. There's a little bit of water, no matter what wetsuit I've been in. I
Yep.
always seem to get that. And I've always wondered, does my wetsuit to be tailored in a little bit?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Well, one idea on a new wetsuit design is that you only have neoprene on the front part of the wetsuit, and you don't need it on the backside because it's out of the water. So yeah, I think that small your back can open up. What happens then is you get that cold water keep going flushing through there. And
Yep.
that's where your wetsuit will not keep you as warm if the water temp starts getting, below 60.
Yeah.
That's not going to be as effective. So I have a little better wetsuit for me for colder water, and that's one of the things. It's a very tight wetsuit, even in the trunk region, and so I don't have that fresh water keep coming in, and then I have to heat it up again before it keeps me warm. The other thing that's important with your wetsuit is practice running in it.
Yeah.
How many races have we done where the transition from swim to bike can be almost a kilometer? I think about Arizona last year. There's some long runs, and we've actually done some work on how hard it is to run either with your wetsuit fully up, not taken down, or running halfway with the wetsuit halfway down, or running carrying it. And oddly enough, it's more economical to run with the wetsuit all the way up rather than taking it halfway down.
So I'm guilty of trying to get my wetsuit off as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is, for me, I feel it restricts my running. And I think maybe it's we're talking about ends of one here. So like, I'm notorious. As soon as I can, I'll get my wetsuit off.
Yep.
And I find even that it helps almost like loosen my hamstrings up a little bit. And then I throw the whole wetsuit over my neck, and I run. Like, I can still use my arms as I'm holding the wetsuit, especially on a long run. If it's like 200 meters, no, I don't do it. But if it's going to be 500 meters, and I've done like ones that have been a kilometer, I want to get it off as quick as I can.
No, that's great. And this is a race tactic. Yeah. And so in sprint races or Olympics, I'm trying to get it off as fast as I can. I'm exiting the water. I'm already trying to get it off.
Yeah.
And usually those transitions are really short. So, you're sacrificing being, less economical because you're trying to get it off as quick as you can.
Yeah.
Some people will take the wetsuit off in the water, and because it's easier, because you fill the wetsuit up with water and now it expands, and now it's just easier to get off.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a race and I'm not worried about my time at all, and I'm trying to complete an event versus complete it or compete in it, I may take the time to take the wetsuit off in the water, and it is that much more easier. You're not falling over, you're not losing your balance, taking a spill that way. So I have seen some people do that, but usually when you're not really concerned about your swim time or your bike time or your transition times. But
one thing I'd like to add here, John, and I think it's really, really important, is practice taking your wetsuit off.
Yep.
Right? Like, it's hard because the only time you can practice, I find, is when it's already wet, and then you don't want to put it back on. Right? So, one of the things that I did for a while was I'd bring my wetsuit to swim practice, and I'd swim in the first 10 minutes. And then I'd jump out and practice taking it off. And I just do it once. If you do that once, even once a week, you'll get better at taking it off faster. And there's definitely techniques to getting it off faster. And I still, honestly, I got a new wetsuit last year, and I'm still struggling to get it off fast. To the point where I'm thinking of cutting the legs a little bit to help get it off faster.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. Cause it does you no good to start the bike exhausted from just trying to get your wetsuit off.
Well, my problem, honestly, is, and I know other people struggle with this too, is I can cramp up in my hamstrings or my
Yeah.
quads while I'm getting my wetsuit off because
That's
I'm
right.
forcing
That's
it
right.
so much. And it's
Yep.
such a weird, you're switching from this type of muscular contraction to another type of
Yep.
muscular contraction, and you're trying to balance,
Mm-hmm.
which is a neural cascade of muscular contractions. And I'll cramp
Yep.
doing that. And that's not a good feeling to be standing there, can't move until this cramp subsides. And then, then you still got your wetsuit off
Mm-hmm.
and get on the bike.
No, that's right. And because you're going from horizontal as well, now you're vertical, you've got redistribution of blood. So no, you're right. You've got to practice this. This is, it's really, it's such a critical, important component of the race.
And I think a lot of triathletes and people in general, like they feel like, well, if I'm wearing my wetsuit in the pool, people are going to look at me funny, or
Mm-hmm.
who cares? Just
Yeah,
do what you got to do,
that's
right?
right.
They're not the ones that are going to go race this weekend or next weekend and have different goals than you have. Just
Yep.
do what you want to do.
Yep. No, for sure. And if you're wearing your wetsuit in the pool, I would just be careful getting in and out because that's an easy way to rip it on the side of the pool.
Yes.
So sliding in, sliding out, you just ripped your neoprene. So it's not built for that type of. And we've got plenty of wetsuits in the lab that have a lot of the rips in it. So, all right. So one other thing I wanted to mention here on the swim part is when to stand.
Oh, yeah.
So when to stand, you swim until your hand touches the water, or excuse me, touches the bottom. Once your hand touches the bottom, stand up. Not before, because then you're too deep, and sometimes your depth perception gets lost in the swim, and the bottom is a lot further than you can maybe able to see it, but it's a lot deeper than you actually think it is.
Well,
So
John, we talked about course recon, and that's another thing to look at is,
yeah,
how long is it shallow for? How long is it
yep,
deep for?
that's
And
right.
and then also, if you can during the practice, look at the footing. You
Yep,
know, I've done a few races where we've had, obviously at Lake Mead, where we've had really,
yep,
depending on the year and the time, some very, very sharp rocks. And I'll actually go even deeper, like further. So like I almost can't swim anymore.
mm-hmm,
I don't want a chance cutting my feet
yep.
on the rocks. And I think that's an important thing. You're better off swimming longer than getting up
Yep.
and running.
No, that's right, definitely. And now we did purchase a swim exit mat. So
We did.
yeah, so we'll have it for our races. That'll be good.
Yeah.
But no, checking the footing out, checking out the exit, knowing where, roughly how far you're going to swim in. Those are all good things. So,
Yeah.
all right. So let me switch gears. I wrote some notes down on goggles.
Yes.
So lots
We
of
should
people
wear,
ask about goggles.
we should wear them.
Yes. I have practice goggles and I have race goggles. Because my practice goggles, I just throw in my bag and I go away. And usually for practice, I'll use my $5 Swedes.
Yep.
All right. So these are really low cost. I also, after I get done swimming, I'll wash them out with soap. Now, a lot of people will say use baby soap, and that helps keep the anti-fog going. Now, if it's a brand new pair, I don't wash them out afterwards. I only start washing them when the anti-fog starts to wear off. But then I routinely wash them with soap. It doesn't matter what kind of soap it is. Any soap for your hair is going to work. The idea behind the baby shampoo is it irritates your eyes less if you don't rinse it all the way out. So I'll wash it, rinse them out, and then put them away, let them dry, and then I'll get a little bit more anti-fog the next time. So, but I have different sets of practice goggles. Your goggles do not need to be super tight around your head. They just need to be tight enough to hold that socket onto your face. And if you end up leaving your swim and you got these deep rings around your eyes, you probably have your band too tight. So really loose.
Or the goggle is not right for your face.
That's right. That's
But
right.
that's
So
another thing is once again, just because you bought it on the internet and you got a good deal doesn't mean it's the right goggle for your face setup.
that's right. So for $5, I can try, this type of goggle. You can change the nose bridge and what have you. But then for a nicer goggle, more comfortable, I'll do my long swims in something with the seals. And but you do need to make sure that it fits your face. And getting leaky goggles, you should be able to have a pair of goggles that do not leak. It makes swimming so much more enjoyable when you're not always having water in your goggle.
So John, I'll tell you a quick little story of why I didn't swim till I turned 38. So when I was younger and I took swim lessons, my goggles always leaked.
Yeah.
And I just hated it. Like
Yep.
you get that chlorinated water in your eye.
Yep.
And honestly, I could never find a pair of goggles and honestly, back then I didn't go to like a really nice swim store or anything. You just went to, whatever sporting goods store and grab the goggles and these should work.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I realized that I actually have a really narrow space between my eyes and I actually need to switch out that nose piece.
Yep.
And as soon as I found a pair that could do that, it never leaked anymore.
No.
Right. And I think I probably would have started swimming a lot of years sooner had I found goggles that didn't leak.
No, having the right goggles makes all the world different. The problem with these is the field of view is really bad. You get tunnel vision. So if I don't feel like having the tunnel vision, I'll wear a goggle that has a little bit more bigger field of view, especially for open water swimming. But yeah, they should not leak and they should not be causing pain during the swim at all. So yeah, so a lot of them come with exchangeable bridges. But another source of leak, there's two other sources that I've run into. One is your swim cap can interfere with the seal. And then also the length of your eyebrows. Oddly enough, your eyebrow hair, at least that happens to me, can get stuck between the seal and your skin. And now all of a sudden you've got a source for water to enter your goggles. So you have to trim your eyebrows.
I like it.
So then I have my race goggles, and they're for racing only. So I keep them in a case, and these are ready to go for race day. And I keep them separate. Now I'll change them out. I'll change out my race goggles, and eventually my race goggles will become my practice goggles, that type of deal, when I start losing that anti-fog.
So John, I just want to add in that for any big race, new pair of goggles.
Yep.
No matter what. Like I buy my goggles usually on Black Friday. I know the exact ones I get. I buy every year. It's been there've been 2 for 1 on Black Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy like how many big races am I going to have next year? Oh, I'm going to have 5 or 6. Buy 6 pairs of goggles, and then because I don't want to risk it for it ends up being $10 a pair of goggles.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as I'm done with that race, then I'll maybe use them for a couple smaller races, and then they'll become a practice goggle.
Yep, that's perfect.
For the amount of money we spend racing and stuff like that, $10 to not have foggy goggles is worth it for me.
Yep. No, you're spot on. And then I see Jack just posted about different colors. I like to have some shaded ones, but then I also go armed with some more clear ones. I don't have a very clear one, but this one's a little lighter clear lens. And I'll always go to a race with different sets of goggles, and then decide based upon cloud cover, where sunrise is going to happen, which goggles to use, because there's nothing worse than not being able to see during an open water swim.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I always minimum 2 pair, one really dark, one quite light, depending on the cloud cover and, like you said, which direction the sun is. All of those things play a role.
So one of my tricks with keeping good anti-fog in the beginning of the swim is I keep my goggles dry. Keep them dry. I don't spit in them. I don't lick in them. I don't do anything. If anything, I'll take my thumbs and I'll clean them out, but I keep them dry. I don't want them to get wet at all. And because once you start getting them wet, you start to run the risk of getting more fog.
You're talking about the inside getting wet.
That's right. The inside. That's right. Right. So keep the inside dry.
One of the things you can do is in your warm up, is if you do warm up swimming, is get them the same temperature, get them colder. And I've actually read that actually will help keep the fog away as well, because it's the
That's
fog
right.
comes from the difference in temperature.
It's the
So,
gradient. That's right.
yeah. So
That's
if you
right.
can get them a little cooler,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes you won't fog as much.
Yep.
But yes, keep the inside dry.
Yep. No, it's good. And then cap, or your cap over, or your strap under. Well, I just said it the same way, two different ways. So do you put your strap over your cap, or do you put your strap under the cap?
I go over because I'm not so concerned about somebody like knocking them or whatever. That's just, for me, it's kind of how I've always done it. But I wouldn't have a problem doing the other way either. I don't think.
I put mine under the cap, and the reason I do that is I can have a looser strap on my goggles, and so it makes my socket a little bit more comfortable for me. If I put the strap outside the cap, it has a tendency, just the way my head's shaped, I guess, for to shift, and I need to have a tighter strap for my goggle, and I don't like that as much. So that's why I wear my strap under my cap.
And it looks really cool, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really intimidating looking when you look over at you in a race and you got it underneath. It's like, this guy knows what he's doing.
That's part of it, right? All right. So let's see. Prescription goggles. If you can't see, you're running the risk of swimming longer. So I always wear contacts when I do my open water swim. If you need to get prescription goggles, they do have those, and you can get those as well. Let's see, sighting, drafting. This goes along with sighting. I love talking about races afterwards, and you hear about the battles that are in the swim, people bumping into each other. And I've been swimming, and this, you just have this sense that this person just keeps bumping into me. And I'm like, why is this person doing this? Well, in reality, it may actually be me not swimming straight.
Yep.
And I have to accept that maybe I wasn't swimming straight, and maybe I was off course. So trying to figure out how to swim with other people and stay on course at the same time. I at a big race, I'll really pay attention to where I want to start in the swim. Try to get to that clear water. If it's a rolling start, I still try to pay attention to which lane I'm going to be in if I'm going to do roll. To be able to be in clear water as much as possible. I saw Bob actually posted something on another thread about drafting off other swimmers. Yes, drafting's great, but you've got to trust the person in front of you knows where they're going.
And you've got to trust that they swim at a constant velocity.
That's right. That's right.
Or next thing you know, you're bumping into them, or all of a sudden they start breaststroking and kick you in the face. I mean, it's not all glorious.
Yep. No. So yes, drafting can be a benefit, but it can also be a detriment if the person in front of you is not going to stay on course, or they're going to do, like you said, start, stop, and then you're going to run into some more problems. So
I ran into an issue once where I was drafting off somebody, and they were swimming quite straight, but every time they sighted, and they only sighted every maybe 7 or 8 strokes, they'd slow down, and I'd hit them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they stop and they start, beaking off at me. And I'm like, hey, I'm swimming the same speed. You're the one that's keep slowing down.
Yeah.
So,
it's
fun though.
You've got to figure out how to swim on your own, how to swim straight. And if you do happen along with someone who you're able to partner up with and draft, and I would still sight off that person. So that they're not. So if they're going off course, you know that you can correct, and trying to make that swim as short as possible by staying on course is where you're going to save time.
So John, why is it in triathlon that in general people are jerks in the swim, right? People are a little bit pretty aggressive on the bike, but then the run, everyone's like, "Hey, good job, go!" Yeah. It's like this Frankenstein mentality in triathlon. Have you ever noticed this?
Oh, yes, and I've got stories about it, but it's I think part of it is the clarity of the water.
Yeah.
that if you're swimming in a body of water where you can't see a foot in front of you, Tempe Lake in Arizona,
Yeah.
for example, then you're going to be more likely running into people. I don't think it's anyone doing it on purpose, but just because you can't see, and a lot of us can't swim straight, that we're just sort of, meandering and running into each other. I think, again, it's good to take a step back and say, okay, wait a second, maybe I need to find the right, where the clear water is,
Yeah.
and sight and swim straight. I think,
I
in
always thought it was the anonymity of,
yeah, that's,
like, people don't know who you are, and no one knows who you are in the swim because you can't see their face,
yeah.
you can't see their head. But
Well, and you do have to swim defensively.
yeah,
And this is something that is important in the swim, especially when you get to the turn buoys, is you have to swim in a way. I don't think anyone's purposely trying to kick anyone. Now, it does happen. There's stories about it. But going around a turn buoy, someone's going to slow down invariably and do breaststroke.
yeah,
Knowing that ahead of time, you need to swim in a way that if someone is doing breaststroke, they're not going to kick you, or you're going to block the kick. And so there is a way to try to approach it so that anytime someone does hit you, it doesn't come off as they're trying to get me.
yeah.
And most of the time they're not.
They're just trying to survive.
Sometimes that's right. Sometimes they are, but most of the time they're not. So, but yeah, it can get rough at times. But pick your lane.
Yeah,
And if you're a confident swimmer, I'll tell you one thing I do in the beginning of the swim. Even though I tend to be more the front of the pack, especially for when I'm doing age group wave, I'll still start off to the side because I don't want to be in that fray. Because too many people like to just go out hard, and then they fall off the pace.
yeah.
And you're stuck with this mosh pit of people that it can be quite a bit of a problem. So I try to avoid it and stay out of it, because I'll swim faster even though I need to swim maybe a little bit longer line just to stay out of that fray.
Yeah. And less chance of getting kicked or,
Yep.
yeah,
No.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and my one story is my brother and I were talking about this, and we were racing Darien Lake back in New York, and we were talking about how rough the swims were, and then this is the way he tells the story. We stood next to each other, the gun went off, and apparently my hand swung around, and I smacked him right in the head and knocked his goggles off. I didn't feel a thing.
Yeah.
I keep saying it wasn't me. It must have been someone else because I didn't feel it.
But it was you.
But it was most likely me, and it was just unintentional. It just happens sometimes. So it's not. Well, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. That was awesome.
Yeah.
It was very, very educational tonight.
No, I love to swim. I love to swim. It's just enjoy it. So, and it's good if you can find that level of enjoyment. It makes it easier to do a little bit of that time in the water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
All right, good. That was excellent.
Yeah. Well, thanks, and thanks everyone for watching. And Ted and I will talk and figure out what the next talk's going to be about. Awesome. Thanks, Ted.
You're welcome. Thank you.